Yo, what's up today? We're going to talk about street photography and how you can get into it if you're looking to, and what the best way is. I'm going to show you some examples, and I'm going to show you some tips and stuff like that on how you can get into street photography like I did, if that's what you're looking to get into. Let's roll the intro. Okay, so the topic is street photography and how you get into it. First, let me give you a little bit of background on myself. My name is Patrick. I shoot street photography majorly. It's pretty much all I do nowadays. I do some other things in between when I get bored with street photography, but most of the time it's street captures, candid, stuff like that, all over the place. I shoot mostly in the southeast of the US, but whenever I can venture out, I typically do. Obviously, within the last year or so, that hasn't been much, but that's just how it is. But I wanted to talk to you today about film photography and digital photography when it comes to street stuff, because I think street photography is one of the easiest ways to get into photography, because it just takes whatever camera you're shooting and then getting out to those normal places that you would go to anyway, and you can make some insanely good photos from it. So let's talk about some tips. I'll show you some examples, and yeah. So in total, I want to give you 3 tips for street photography and how you can go about doing that, and some easy ways to avoid mistakes when it comes to street photography. The first one we're going to talk about is not being scared. This is probably the first tip I'm going to give, because it is the most important when it comes to street photography. I've kind of coined the phrase street anxiety. I don't know if anybody else uses that, but if you've ever shot street photography, you know what I'm talking about. It typically is something where you go to a location and you feel like people are watching you, or you feel like you're not supposed to be there, or whatever the case is, you feel anxious about taking photos in that location. So one of the ideas that I have for street photography, as far as street anxiety goes, that'll help you get over that, is worrying less about the imposter syndrome. So this is the feeling that someone would get when they say that I don't know what I'm doing, I shouldn't be doing this, somebody does it better, I've seen lots of other cool stuff, so mine's not going to be any good. Do not worry about any of that, because that's not what matters. There is no one that is taking that photo, that is in that location with their camera like you are. Snap your photos as long as you can, or as long as you want to, as long as you can. Obviously don't do anything illegal like get into places you shouldn't, but on the other side, like, this is your perspective, it's your art, you do what you want to do. Don't worry about an imposter syndrome, because it is what it is. Everybody feels it, but just try and work on it less and less, and then eventually it'll go away. And the thing that ties in with the imposter syndrome that gives you the street anxiety is the fact that you feel out of place, or you feel like people are watching you, so you don't want to do street photography because you feel like it's awkward or whatever, which is, again, absolutely normal. Everyone feels it. Even like pros feel it at some point in time. The difference between a pro and an amateur when it comes to street photography is not always the photos, it's just how they handle the situation. So when you realize this and you understand what's happening, you'll focus less on that. So a tip for dealing with that instance is just ignore everything that's going on around you. Just focus on what you're doing. If you focus harder on your composition, your exposure, your aperture, your ISO, your focal length, whatever you're focused on with your photo, you will focus less on like the surrounding environment, which will help you out when it comes to having that street anxiety. So with those 2 things, those are my 2 biggest tips when it comes to street photography and entering, because the barrier is so low, but those 2 things will raise it up to a point where a lot of people won't get into it, and they should. The second hardest thing when it comes to street photography that I've noticed, that I feel like a lot of people that shoot street photography have, deals with composition. So once you've moved on from the street anxiety and now you're ready to shoot, comes with composition and making good photos from things that are typically random, or they don't fit your normal photography, or maybe you're not into photography at all and you're getting into it and you just don't know how to make composition. So let me give you a tip on composition. So for street photography in general, composition is typically pretty tough because of those things, like I said, when it deals with things that are just random in the streets. As far as starting out, you can even consider architecture photography a piece of street photography, because you're able to find those things in the street that are still, or don't move very much, or don't move at all when it comes to buildings, obviously. Those are things that you can start with, and then you can move on from there if you want to talk about street photography and how to get started in it, because those are things that typically are easy to shoot. They won't move, obviously. That's the biggest one. And then other than that, they're not staring back at you while you're taking the photo. So a lot of people will get nervous again, that street anxiety with photography when it comes to taking candids of people. But when you're able to take photos of things that aren't moving, whether it be parked cars or buildings or signs or anything like that, those are a lot easier at first to shoot than it is to try to catch candids of people in like cafes or whatever the case is. The other thing that comes with composition when it comes to street photography is finding your frame before you find your subject. So I know that sounds a little cliche or it might sound a little weird, but if you're able to find your frame before your subject gets there, it'll make the process a whole lot easier. So in one instance, let me give you an example. So if I see a garage door and a normal house door and I'm waiting for somebody to walk through it, that is a way to give me time to set up for that person walking through the frame, because I already have my straight lines, I already have my composer, or my composition, I have my ISO already set to the perfect, it's exposed perfectly, I have my focal length where I need it. These are things that you can do as starting out that'll help you with your street photography, because you're able to set everything up. You're not trying to rush the shot as the person walks through and you're just snapping photos. When you have that, then you let people walk through. Sometimes this takes a little bit more time because you have to sit in the same spot for a long time, but I mean, it is what it is, and this will help you out, especially when starting with street photography. So the third point I want to give to you, and this might be a bonus, I don't remember if I said 2 or 3 points in the beginning of this, but I want to give you this anyway because I think it'll help you out. So street photography is not for just people in LA or Chicago or Atlanta or New York City. It's for anyone that wants to get into it. So what this means is that usually when we see these photos, when you're scrolling through Instagram, you typically see these shots because these are places that are super happening. There's just tons of people around and it's easy to get photos like that. But I give more credit for street photographers who are able to go other places and still get great street photos. So for me, it might be Atlanta. Atlanta might be the place where I can find a ton of subjects for my photography for street stuff. But on the other side, if you're not familiar with it, there's this other area called Gainesville, and Gainesville is nowhere close to the same. It's pretty rural. I mean, it's an urban environment, but it's nowhere close to Atlanta, let's just say that. So for me, there's a square in Gainesville that is not super happening. I mean, for Gainesville, I guess it is, but not for like most people. I guess when you're talking about big cities and street photography. But I wanted to show you 3 images that you've probably seen before, and those are these. So this is a simple street photography. This is just a car that I've cut down into 2 more photos, one of the door itself and then one of the tire. Now, some people will look at these and say, wow, that's pretty cool. And then other people will be like, that's pretty basic, I don't care. For me, street photography is anything, anywhere you can find something when you're walking around, when you're in the streets. This doesn't have to be in a big city. It can be wherever you're at. So keep that in mind when you're talking about street photography. It's not just for people in big cities, and I think some people will disagree with me on that, and I think some people will try to gatekeep street photography in that aspect, and they'll say that your town isn't important or your town isn't big enough for street photography, but they're completely wrong in my eyes. I think you can get a good photo anywhere you need it. With that, I conclude my little rant about street photography. I hope this helps you out when it comes to street photos. If you will, hit that thumbs up button down there if any of this helped you out. If you want some more, leave a comment. Let me know what your questions are, and I'll make sure to hit them in the next one. This is a new channel, so all your thumbs up help. All your comments help. If you want to subscribe for more photography and more tips, tricks, how-tos, news, or anything like that, definitely hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell if you want to for future updates. Thank you so much. I hope, like I said, this helped out, and I look forward to talking to you more. Peace out, and I'll see you in the next one.